What is going on, you guys? Jerry Trades back with another banger video. I hope all of you guys had an amazing Thanksgiving. We're just coming off of Thanksgiving. We are closed on Thursdays. Markets went ahead and opened up today on a Friday. Beautiful day on the markets. You know, one thing I started noticing going into the end of this week is the market sentiment. You know, it's starting to change. We're starting to heading up a little bit more bullishly compared to, you know, last week's performance in the end when we were a bit bearish. You know, I always kind of want to inform you guys, like, taking into consideration on market sentiment before taking trades is very important. Like, if there's one thing you can do to avoid risk, it's understanding the market sentiment for the week or the session you're trading. So let me explain to you guys a little bit more about market sentiment. Like, Jerry, what is that? Like, you know, I'm brand new, I don't know what that is. Let me go ahead and bring up SPY. Remember on my last video I went ahead and mentioned that SPY is your key reference point to the market's performance, as it contains, you know, the top 500 companies in the stock market, and it's going to reflect a lot of, you know, companies are going to it's going to reflect the price action of a lot of companies, simply because it technically is like you could look at it as the average performance of the market. So, you know, now we've been here Friday, as of closing last week, trending into this week, we had a switch. You know, previously we're coming from here. Look at this. Let me put in a bigger time frame. Look at this sentiment here. Maybe too big of a time. Let's hop on the 15-minute, right? Let's give you guys that really good perspective. We're coming down from these highs over here at 683 down to a low of 653. So we're down $30 on the SPY ETF, and that's where, okay, look, we're getting a little bit of a switch. You can see it, you know. You see that the market was trending bearishly. Boom, we caught this small little gap, and now we're trending back upwards. So going into this week, I started noticing, you know, the sentiment's changing, whether it be for the holidays, whether it be, you know, interest cut decision being a little bit more bullish or more priced in terms of predictable. You know, we have a bit of factors changing the market sentiment, and that's essentially how you guys want to perceive it. You know, the market sentiment is like, what's the general market? What's the general trend of the market? Is it going down or is it going up? Well, starting here last Friday, we started turning back up, going into Tuesday, going into Monday, Wednesday, and now concluding, you know, the week on Friday, because we were off yesterday for Thanksgiving. I hope all you guys had a great one. So that was essentially, you know, my going into today's market. I'm like, you know what, things are picking up. We got retail up, you got Urban Outfitters, you got Kohl's, you got Macy's. You have a lot of stocks performing well going into December. So, you know, only thing that I'm really concerned about going into December's market is first that interest rate cut and November's economic data. But I'm kind of bullish on November's economic data after seeing Urban Outfitters and these retail stocks perform very well. I think it reflects a very I wouldn't say aggressive consumer, but I think we have, you know, consumer spending up there. We're not looking like we have consumer sentiment, which is same thing like market sentiment, being a little bit more fearful. You know, we have spending, consumer spending increasing here across the board. So Wednesday, before market close, I went ahead and shared with you guys that trade on Tesla that I broke even. I was like, you know what, we still have a pretty strong, you know, bullish sentiment in the market. Tesla, you know, being notorious for making aggressive price moves, I'm like, let's go ahead and trade and see what we can make happen today. So, you know, I initially looking at the chart, I'm like, okay, we're, you know, clearly, let me kind of get into, extend this a bit longer for you guys to see. So we're previously trading down here, right? Support, resistance. Up here at 417, we got a little bit of resistance. But before markets close on Tuesday, I was really over here Wednesday. Kind of cup and handle pattern right here. Boom, boom. Heading all the way up here. Pretty nice formation. But really how we jumped up aggressively on Wednesday before market close, and then understanding, you know, SPY's movement. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up the 1 minute chart here on Tesla so you guys can see what happened today. Look at this. Pre-market, we got this aggressive jump up. Boom, hit a high here of 432. Came down. Using this aggressive buy here as a reference, I was like, to me, that's maybe manipulation. Individuals maybe hedging on puts, or maybe, you know, clearing out those call options so we could just start turning the market a bit more bullishly. That was my perspective going into it. I seen this sell off and I caught this bottom. here at the bottom here, I'm like, okay, let's go ahead and see what we can make happen. So entering here, this is the problem about trading on Friday's 0 DTE. If you guys thought theta was bad on Wednesday's trade, on a Friday, oh my gosh. Mm. On Wednesday, my sentiment, like my not sentiment, my fear of theta and losing, value, it was priced in. Like, of course, it was a factor, and I was fearful because Thursday's markets were gonna be closed. But on a Friday, there's no hope. There's no like, oh, market's gonna open on Friday. I'm still gonna have my position. I'm gonna be able to make some money. No, like today, it's one and done. If you don't hit it big, you're done. All capital you invested is lost. So I was like, all right, taking this into consideration, let's go ahead and play it safe here, right? And I entered off this break right here. Didn't catch this very bottom here, but I did enter around here. But this is what I was doing all day today. I exited here. I didn't catch the rest of this like an idiot. I could have caught that, and it would have been a very profitable day, but I'm not complaining with what I left. I think we ended up closing that trade at around maybe like 60%, 50% on 2 contracts. Wasn't that bad. Still pretty decent progress on the account, but now looking at the entry here, as we were facing this consolidation, remember theta I mentioned is like time decay. You're losing value on contracts. So I was moving my entry up, 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 because I needed a more buy. I needed to essentially trade higher than this line to be in the profits as I was trading. Usually when I first entered, I'd be here and I'd be in the profits. Nope. With theta being so aggressive on the 0 DTE, I had to move it up. So I was constantly looking like, damn, like, is it gonna break out here? I'm over here looking at this aggressive jump up right here, but look at this. We consolidated here, and we consolidated here for maybe roughly like 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes at most. Let's look at this. You got 335 to almost 335, so like almost like 20 minutes there consolidating. So I was like, okay, perfect. Didn't really like that because I was caught in between, but essentially finally we were able to break out. Once we broke out, another point of consolidation here, similar to the one that we just seen. You see it happen here. You see that consolidation happen here. You see that consolidation repeat itself, and then boom, we got this big jump up, not to all-time highs for the day of 432, but we did able to get 431 high for almost 432. So I didn't catch this, gonna be completely honest with you guys, but I did catch this, and that was my win for the day. I think we were able to close 50-60% in like 20-30 minutes, and that was, bro, I had just woken up out of bed. I didn't really get much sleep the night before, so I wasn't able to trade all this, but I was able to make something happen with today's market, and I was very excited to see this gap up here on Tesla and take that as a profit. A little win to close off the week on a winning basis, and that's huge. I think like a lot of traders underestimate that winning momentum. It helps with your mindset. It helps with your whole entire mentality going into trading. If you're coming off some wins, you're gonna have a little bit of increased confidence behind every trade. So it was a great way to end the week. I have no complaints. Currently growing the small account. We started with 500 on Friday, and now we closed it at 863 on. No, we started with 800 on Monday, and then we closed at 863 on Friday with 1 day missing. So you're kind of looking at that like a $300 gain in a week. Not the greatest returns, honestly. I think I've noticed myself this week being a little bit more conservative. I didn't hold Costco. That trade did over 362%. I looked at it this morning. I'm like, wow, what an opportunity. Buying contracts for, I believe, 350, and then them being worth 1145 on Friday today. I was like, wow, what a huge opportunity. Like, missed that train. I think we had like $745 in profit that we left on the table. So that was a bit unfortunate, but I think it's just, overcoming that fear of losing, not overcoming, but battling that fear of losing this capital 100%. Not being in the, I guess you can argue, the 4-figure range, losing a couple $100, it's like detrimental to the progress of your account. And this is very important you guys understand as a trader, right? Like a lot of individuals that don't have that, I would say that risk tolerance they're gonna be like a lot more fearful when it comes to trading with bigger amounts. But in reality, like when you're trading, you want to make somewhat decent income. You know, you want to see the hundreds, at least three, 400, to be able to, actually say, hey, this was worth it. You know, a lot of individuals, they go into it with a bias. You know, either they're too fearful and they are able to pull great percentages. This is something that I've been battling with and learning a lot too, is that, the percentage game. Like, you can't compare 10% of $1,000 being 100 and then 10% of $100 being $10. Which one are you gonna want to sell more? You're gonna want to sell on that 10% move on 1,000 because it's at least $100 in your pocket. If you were to move 10% on $100, you're not gonna want to sell because it's $10. I can't even buy myself a cheeseburger with this. That's the mindset. That's where you have to learn to kind of overcome that fear to be able to capitalize on those bigger capital gains. And not a lot of people get to be able to see that light because they, simply continuously work with that fear of playing with bigger capital. So overcoming that, I think, me, I'm in just a state of fear because of, the continuous losses that I was caught being bullish in this bearish market here in, the last couple weeks that we've had. I think, what is it? Probably week 1, week 2 of November were really choppy, taking a lot of hits in the market. That really pushed me down and, kind of messed up my confidence, but nothing to really worry about. I'm happy with today's this week's performance, and it's really, it's turning out to be a better market for everyone. If you guys, are looking to be heading into December, I would say be bullish. We have the holidays coming around that usually boost the economy in a very healthy way. I think just going into December, be cautious with the increased volatility behind the Federal Reserve's interest rate decision. That's going to be a huge, increase and catalyst for volatility going into December. I think we have November's economic data that should shake up the market, but end of the day, I think we're going to close 2026 or 2025 on a bullish sentiment. I think we got analysts like very, very, very reputatable analysts like Tommy Lee saying that the market is shaping out to be bullish to close off the year. You also have JP Morgan coming out on Thanksgiving saying that they actually turned their bias on the market to bullish, and they believe that sometime 2026 the S&P 500 will now reach $700 a share. $700 a share for S&P. I just want you guys to know that is historical. It's never happened since the 1980s at all. This is the highest the S&P 500 will ever be trading. And this is a very interesting, perspective that I want to share with you guys. Not just trading, investing, using, these cellular devices to access stock brokerages and use your income from your checkings account to now buy assets, buy stocks. It's just, I would argue, barely picking up. Not a lot of retail investors, individuals, even, I know my age, are starting to buy stocks. Like, it's very kind of rare, but I think these cellular devices are making it much more accessible and easier for people to start investing. So we could start seeing, you got to keep in mind this mindset of individuals that are coming into the world and starting to invest. We're going to see not an influx, but an increase in individuals starting to, invest here in the market. So $700 for SPY is very doable, especially as more awareness and more participation comes from the United States economy into the market. It's a big, kind of trending topic right now to start investing, to start trading. So that's very possible, but I think it's very important that although it's shaping out to be bullish, always, we still have a little bit of conflict here with China. I think I read I wouldn't say the weekend, over the holiday, that we have a little bit of rising conflict out there in Japan. So that's very interesting, to see how that might play out for us economically, especially because Japan's picking a fight with China. We backed Japan up as an ally, but everything we worked for to have these tariff deals and, mend those relationships, it's been, you could technically see it all go down the drain here if Japan's conflict begins to escalate here. But taking that all into consideration, man, I don't know. I think we're going to have a bullish market. Retail always carries the market bullishly because they don't know how to do anything else but buy. It's always institutions that take advantage of the selling pressure. But I think there's a lot of potential going into December. That's going to wrap up November. We had an amazing month. Very choppy, I would say developing more of my confidence going into the end of the month compared to the beginning. Missed out on a lot, but I like it. I like the way that we're playing out into December. I hope all you guys have the best of luck trading in December. If you guys ever want more help into, getting and exploring, getting more experience and exploring the markets, here at SoCal Trading Group, we're always welcoming you guys with open arms and would love to help all of you guys. So I will hope you guys enjoyed today's market recap. Tesla, 56% gain on 11/28, closing out November, jumping into December. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Jerry Trades of SoCal Trading Group, over and out.